Good morning, good evening, good whatever time it is you're listening to this. I hope you're having a good one. I'm going to be going over the data sets, the earnings, and the SPY for April 22nd, 2025. And with that said, let's jump straight into the data. Pull up, there we go. Alright, so as I went over in my video yesterday, we don't have a ton of data this week. So tomorrow we really have Harker speaking essentially right at market open. Excuse me. Essentially right at market open. And then at 1 a.m. or 1 p.m. we have the 2-year auction. I told you in my video yesterday how that's a pretty important one for the Fed to watch. So even though we should be anticipating a higher yield coming in, it's good to watch to see if there's, a massive increase or a massive decrease because, like I said, the 2 years is pretty important for the Fed. Um, at 2 p.m. we have Kashkari speaking. Now, again, Kashkari is willing to be pretty hawkish in his speeches, so I always like listening to what he has to say, even though I don't track his speeches too much. I do know that, like I said, he's willing to kind of put the facts out there and then state what needs to be stated. So usually it's fairly hawkish news, which a lot of people are, question me about what does dovish or hawkish mean. So dovish you can kind of think is, I wouldn't say bullish, but it's more of like the cooler side of the news. So if like a data set or something is coming in cooler or yeah, cooler than consensus or anticipation, then that's more of a dovish view of it. So if the Fed is willing to start cutting rates and everything, then that would be more of a dovish view compared to a hawkish view where it would be more of rising rates, rising yields, more of like the bad news. Even though it's not bad news, it's more of like the stronger economic news. And more, yeah, it's more just hawkishness, strength. Um, yeah, so Kashkari is willing to really lay things out. Not that I think he's going to move the market much. I think the market's really going to be focused on Tesla's earnings tomorrow. And Tesla earning, I'm not going to pull up the actual chart because it's in the after hours, but that's going to be a really important one for the market, as I stated in the video last night. It's not just like price driven. It's political. It's really just a lot of things right now. So it'll be interesting to see where Tesla's going to go from here. And I think a lot of speculators are really keeping their eyes on that. Just a quick reminder before we get into the technical analysis. If you've been finding value in my insights, consider joining my Patreon. For just $12.99 a month, you'll get access to my trades, courses, and powerful tools to help you grow as a trader. I'd love to have you be a part of our team and community. And it's less than 43 cents a day. So if you'd like to join, click in the link in the description. Thanks. And getting into the technical analysis, as always, let's go into the daily chart and look at our moving averages and the Bollingers. So we closed at 513.88 and the 5 mile is currently at 528.54, so it's a whole $15 above the market price where we closed. So I'm it's kind of hard to say exactly where it's gonna open at exactly. So as always, just market when the market opens tomorrow, write down where the 5 mile opens because that's going to be a really key level, but it should be close to the 522 range, give or take. It could be at 520, it could be at 524, but it's going to be within that range. Uh, that's my anticipation of it anyway. Very close to where the 5 or where the 10 mile is, if not slightly lower than that. Um, and the 10 mile is at 525.07. So we're below the 10 ma, below the 5 ma, below the 20 ma. The 20 ma is currently at 540.92. And then we're still like far below the 200 mall, so we're still far in bear territory, not escaping that anytime soon. And then we have the lower Bollinger, which is at 491.88, and that's going to continue trending downward as it's tracking the 20 mall. If you're using the standard Bollinger settings, then it's going to be tracking the 20 mall. Um, and as the 20 mom moves down, the bands contract, which means it pulls downward and the top closes in and pulls downward. You can see that kind of right here. But as the 20 mom pulls back upward, it expands again. So we're seeing the 20 mom pulling downward and contracting. So we're going to see the Bollinger Bands. I'm sorry, if you hear my daughter screaming. My wife's giving her bath right now, and she doesn't particularly like those all the time. Anyway, if you see the Bollinger pulling downward, that's why. It's because the 20 mAh is moving down. And as the 20 mAh continues to move down, we will continue to see the lower Bollinger move down with it. So with the lower Bollinger being at 491.88, that's putting us pretty dangerously close to this 481.80 range. And while that's still a $10, $9 to $10 range off, that's going to close very quickly as this 20 mAh pulls downward and consolidates towards this 10 mAh level. So that's our moving averages in Bollinger. Now, the ADL, and usually I explain this in my Sunday videos because I try to be a little bit more thorough compared to the weekly or the standard daily video. But the ADL, I'll just quickly go over how this works. It's kind of like a bank account, so if it's moving downward, then funds are being pulled out. If it's moving upward, then funds are being put in, and that's for any symbol or fund. So this works very well for pretty much any symbol you're going to trade. It's a very good indicator. And so we saw the last few days being kind of a downtrend, but also somewhat flat. Um, it's not exactly a bearish signal, but it's not bullish either. It's just kind of flat right now. It's not a massive sell-off signal yet, but this is kind of alluding to pulling towards that 481.80 level. Um, at least from seeing the money being withdrawn anyway, and continuing to be withdrawn. Now, before we even get into SPY, I just quickly want to visit Bitcoin, which is at a really key level right now. So it's not going to show on here because the desktop Weeble doesn't show the moving averages very well. But the 200 mAh is at the 88.2K, so it's a really key level. And currently Bitcoin's exactly at that level. So as we test that, that's going to be really important for the market because the market and Bitcoin are really tied right now. Um, Institutionally, like Bitcoin is heavily owned by institutions right now compared to how it used to be, where it used to be like an inverse relationship with, the DXY or the US dollar. But now it tracks the S&P and it really tracks it pretty accurately too. So if we see this gap up overnight and push past this 88.2K level, then we're gonna start seeing quite a lot of gap closing upward. There's some major gaps. We have the 92, basically the 93K, um, the 93.8K, the 95.2K. So as you can see, we're starting to want to break back up into the 90K range. If we don't reject here. If we do reject here, then we're going to be heading back down, probably towards the 5 mile, which is currently at the 86,000 mark. So that's just something to be extremely aware of right now is that if we see this pushing well above this 88.2K range, then that's going to be pretty bullish for the market. That's going to pull the S&P up, which means it's going to pull the SPY up. It's going to be pulling tech up, very likely. And as you can see, the overnight prices on everything is really correlating very well with the Bitcoin move. As Bitcoin moves upward, we're seeing the SPY and everything just pull upward in price overnight. As it pulls downward, we're seeing, um, the SPY follow that and track that. So Bitcoin right now is a very strong institutional instrument, and it's a very good indicator to, determine where the market's really heading. So as we test this level, again, very important to be aware of. Now, going back to the SPY, if I could find the ticker, there we go. Okay, going back to the SPY. Now, on the daily chart, and let's pull up the drawings. Delete that. Alright, so we have the large inverse cup, and I've drawn this out a few times. It goes all the way back over there. Okay. Nope, that's not how the cup should look, but, it pulls all the way back down here. Okay. We are now building a handle on this cup, which very likely we're going to see pull all the way down towards the bottom of this blue channel, which again is at that 481.80 and slightly lower than that. So once we start getting to the bottom of this channel, it's entering the high 70, 479 range. Again, we're not there yet, but if we get that Bitcoin rejection, then that's starting to become a lot closer. And the reason why is we have rejected the 20 mall, we rejected the 5 mall, we rejected the 10 mall. Now if we go back up and test the 5 mall and reject it again, then the bottom Bollinger is right here ready to be taken. And again, it's going to be continuing to trend downward. Let's see. Basically, it's going to continue to trend downward. Each session as we continue to chop in this area, and this whole area can be a $10-15 range. There's still, plenty of room in here to move up and down currently. So all the way from this 508, 507 area, all the way to this 542 range. So these are massive candles. It doesn't look like it because just how absurdly the SPY has been moving over the last, few weeks, 2 months, but these are not standard candles. Usually we're getting days that are, a fraction of the percentage compared to what we get now. But with that said, my full expectations are that we are truly going to test the 5 mile and pull downward. Now, with the 5 mile opening tomorrow, potentially around that 522 range, that means the moving average test kind of gives us the range of like 520 on the lower side to the 524 on the higher side. With the overnight being at 517 right now, it essentially puts us only $3 away from the bottom side of the 5 mile test if we are to test it tomorrow. So that can be a bullish thing in the short term because that essentially gives us a run all the way to the 524. But very likely we see that range rejected, and from that rejection we should pull down into lower Bollinger. Now, going over the hourly chart, we do have some bullish structure. We can fill this cup right here, and this cup goes all the way up to the 522.39. So if we start pulling upward and we start testing the 5 mile tomorrow, like I mentioned, if we start heading upward all the way through that 5 mile, then what are we doing? We are building this cup upward, and then rejection from that can build a handle on this cup, which can be, a very bullish thing. Um, this handle could also turn into a very bearish thing too, because if this handle rejects, then what does this turn into? This turns into an inverse cup, and inverse cups lead to more downside. So that's one thing we kind of have to be prepared for if we are going to test the 5 mile, is that um, it can still very much so be bearish liquidity, even though we are potentially going to be heading upward, almost $10, slightly more. So just be aware of that. But if we don't pull upward and we do start rejecting the bottom of the 5 mile range, then um, the lower Bollinger's at the 591, which that's really not too far away. We've been getting 10, 15, $20 days pretty consistently over the last few weeks, so that could be 1 to 2 sessions away if things, you know, don't fill out that cup. Then we could start looking for potentially like a large head and shoulders forming here. And this would invalidate the cup because we would no longer take this range. I'm trying to draw an X, but yeah, so it would no longer take that range, which would, invalidate the cup, which would um build us a bearish structure. Sorry, I'm like spacing out. I'm so tired. I've been absolutely exhausted. So ultimately, that's kind of the thesis right now, is that um look for what the market does with both Bitcoin for the 200 mod test, if we accept that or reject that, and what the SPY does with the 5 mod, whether we accept that or reject that. Really, that's kind of all you have to pay attention to right now. Those are the two key levels for the market, almost entirely. And again, we really don't have major data tomorrow, so um, yeah, this can pull downward pretty massively, or it could pull upward massively. But we have our targets in range, and we just need to be aware of that. Anyway, I'm absolutely exhausted. I'm down for the count, so I'm gonna go ahead and end the video here. I believe I covered everything I needed to cover. So I hope everyone has a great trading day tomorrow. Trade safe and just stick to the plan. Watch Bitcoin, watch the SPY 5 mall, and um, don't try to force anything you don't need to force. The play will open up if it's ready, and then if you've been following me for a while, then you know that we pretty consistently follow these movements. So just trade a level at a time. And assuming we do get to the 5 mile tomorrow, then we're going to set up positions. Generally, I set up 2 to 4 weeks out. I try to set up calls on the bottom side of the 5 mile, and I try to set up puts on the upper side of the 5 mile. So that way I can create sort of a profit gap between the call and the put and the straddle, and it also allows me to get better premiums in general and better contract strikes. So that's kind of the goal for the 5 mile. Um, but yeah, have a good day, everybody. Trade safe, and I will see you in the next one.